we are coming towards the end of Chanukah, and so I wanted to address both Chanukah as well as the upcoming fast next week, the 10th of Tevet, and they do follow a common thread. Now, this question is addressed both in the Pachad Yitzchak and Alei Shur, I believe, as well as others, and this to say, why is it that Chanukah is given so little attention among our sources? Now, among our early sources, I should say. What do I mean? So there are, many of the obviously Chagim are midoraita. They are addressed in the Chumash. However, there are two popular ones that are not, namely Chanukah and Purim. Now, both of these are not sourced in the Chumash, right? It is not a deoraita holiday. However, it's rabbinically ordained. What's interesting about Purim is that it's actually acknowledged in an actual Sefer in Tanakh, the Megillah Esther. Moreover, Purim is addressed in a Masechta, in the Mishnah, as well as it has a Gemara, namely the Masechet Megillah. Both of these things, namely Megillah Esther as well as Masechet Megillah, address the story of and the miracle of Purim. Chanukah, on the other hand, is not given any attention in Tanakh. There's no book that kind of tells the story of Chanukah, and it doesn't even have its own Masechta. And not only does it's addressed, Chanukah is only addressed in maybe a daf or two. In Shabbat, it's just given, really not that much attention. And moreover, even when Chanukah is discussed in the Mishnah, it's very tangential to the central point of the Mishnah. For example, if a person, let's say, lights a fire at some candles and puts it outside, and a wayfarer, someone crossing along the road, burns some of his stuff, that chenvani, that storekeeper, is actually liable for the damages. However, if that storekeeper was putting out his candles for Chanukah, right, to fulfill the mitzvah, then the storekeeper is not liable for the damages. He's exempt. But that's all it's really addressed for. Yes, it's true that the Mishnah talks about Chanukah, but it's not for the sake of Chanukah per se. And that requires some attention and analysis. Why is that? And so Pachad Yitzchak explains that that's because one of the central themes of Chanukah is the idea of hiddenness, and the Alei Shur talks about the idea that we are required to work on our midah of pnimiut at this time, of internality. And now the reason why is because of the battle between the Jewish people and the Greeks. The Greeks, it should come as no surprise, really kind of popularized science and philosophy and art and culture, and so that needs to be addressed. Now, why was that so antithetical to the perspective of the Jewish people? And the answer is because everything was kind of leveled in Greek eyes, in terms of they want things to be revealed and measured and quantified. And they're the ones, again, who introduced science to the world. And the Jewish people, it's not that we are opposed to science per se, and we are not, but rather we believe that the world not only exists, reality not only exists on a physical plane that's measurable, but there's a deeper source here, and that's the spiritual source. And that's why in our midrashic literature, when we speak about the Galut Yavan, right, the third exile of Greece, we talk about it as choshech. That's to say, the Greeks darkened the eyes of the Jewish people. Now that's very strange. Again, when we think of Greece, we actually think of enlightenment. We think, again, they're the ones who introduced art and culture and science and philosophy and all of these great things to the world. So when we think of the Greeks, we actually think of the kind of the epitome of the enlightened ones. But according to Judaism, that's not so. And again, the reason why is because, in a way, they darkened our eyes from seeing the deeper spiritual source. They effectively wanted to kind of secularize Torah. They acknowledged the validity of the Torah. The Torah was a wise book, but it shouldn't be given any extra special emphasis here. And there's nothing particular to the Jewish people there's nothing special about the Jewish people and their Torah. It was just another wisdom like anything else. They rejected that categorically. And that, by the way, is also the reason why they not only forbade Torah learning, but they also banned the institution of Rosh Chodesh, right, the setting of the months, as well as Milah, right, the circumcision, and as well as Shabbat. And the reason why that is because Shabbat represents the fact that God created the world, and therefore he kind of he rises above the level of nature. And the reason why they opposed Rosh Chodesh is because that showed that the Jewish people controlled time. We stated when the holidays were. Now, the reason why that's so strange is because one of the holidays, whenever like the winter solstice is determined by nature. The Jewish people are like, no, we understand nature, and of course we do follow the lunar calendar and the solar calendar. However, we declare when it's the new month, and therefore we are the ones who say when our holidays are. That was strange to them. And again, for circumcision, when we circumcise a male, a boy, then what we're saying is, look, this is the way nature is, but we'll correct nature. We'll actually make nature better. And the Greeks were violently opposed to such an outlook. Now, if we actually look at the miracle of Chanukah, what do we identify it as? Of course, the miracle of the oil, right? We did not have enough oil to light for 8 days, and yet we only had enough oil to light for 1 day. However, it lasted for 8 days, and therefore we celebrate for 8 days. However, there are many commentaries that say the miracle of the oil was almost like, it was a side note, really. That wasn't the main miracle. The main miracle was the fact that the few defeated the many. This wasn't 100 people defeating 150. It was the few, maybe the handful, defeating thousands upon thousands of soldiers who were trained for battle by the most powerful military in the world at that time. Greece had just conquered the world, and the Jewish people were fighting them with just a few soldiers. That was the real miracle. But the reason why the miracle of the oil came after was as a banner, a flagship to say, note, there's a miracle here, namely, God provided the miracle of the oil, which was a revealed miracle, in order to kind of emphasize the hidden miracle that was the miracle of the war. Because if there was no subsequent miracle of the oil, it would be very possible for the Jewish people to say this was the reason why we defeated the Greeks was because of good strategy, and they would have seen it as kind of just military prowess and their own genius, and therefore God wanted to make absolutely certain that this miracle would not kind of go unnoticed. And Chazal instituted Chanukah and the lighting of the lights in order to show that there were two miracles going on. Yes, of course, there's the miracle of the oil, but it was also important to realize that the military battle was also miraculous. And this again shows the Jewish desire to kind of look more deeply at what was happening. Namely, yes, if we just looked at the events like a Greek, the Greek in us would have just wanted to say, here is the battle, we won, and here's how we won. The Jew in us wants to say, yes, it's true, we did the correct things, however, the real reason why we won is because God allowed us to win. And that's what the miracle is about. Now, what does this have to do with the 10th of Tevet? The 10th of Tevet is the last of 3 days that kind of commemorates our need to fast to commemorate certain things. There's the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th of Tevet, and each one represents something different. It was actually the 8th of Tevet where the Torah was translated, namely Chumash, was translated into Greek. What happened was King Ptolemy of Egypt, right, who represented the Egyptian Greeks, got 72 of our great sages together. He split them all up and he put them into a room and he told each one of them individually with no prior warning that he wanted them to translate the Torah into Greek. And they all did, and miraculously they actually all had the exact same translation into Greek. And the reason why this was miraculous was because they all instituted specific changes from Hebrew into Greek because they didn't want the Greeks to misunderstand things. For example, in Bereshit at the beginning when God is creating man, the Torah says, Nase Adam, let us make man. And the sages were worried that if we wrote that in Greek, let us make man, the Greeks would have been, here we go, we see that the Torah acknowledges that there are multiple gods. And therefore they said, I will make man. And they effectively circumvented the entire issue. And there are a number of changes like that. But at the end of the day, there was actually a miracle that showed that, there was a miracle that all 72 of these sages translated the Torah into Greek. Now, you think that, okay, well, that's a miracle. That should be commemorated by a celebration. But it wasn't. It's commemorated with a fast. And of course, instead of all fasting on the 8th and 9th and 10th, we just commemorate all these fasts on the 10th. And the reason why we fast in commemoration of the translation of the Torah into Greek is because once we translate it is impossible to translate the Torah. And the reason why that is because for Hebrew is Lashon HaKodesh, it's a holy tongue, and therefore it conveys infinite layers of meaning, and any translation kind of dims the light of the Torah and its meaning. And if you want to get a sense for this, then buy an art scroll. If you buy a generic art scroll, it'll follow the English translation will follow Rashi's explanation. But then also buy art scrolls Ramban, the version on Ramban. And the reason why is because when you read the English, in the Rashi art scroll and the English translation in the Ramban art scroll, you'll see that they're translated differently. And the reason why is because Rashi and Ramban, as well as many other Mefarshim, disagree about what the words mean. There are different ways to read the psukim because sometimes the meaning is ambiguous, and the way that the verses are interpreted will change the meaning of the text. Now, a person loses that when they translate it into a different language. When the Torah was translated into Greek, that was necessarily lost because you had to follow just one meaning. You'll never get the full meaning of the Torah. And that, in a way, it represents the kind of the dimming of the light of the Torah that was forced upon us by the Greeks in Chanukah. And so we see, again, just from the common meaning, Chanukah was our victory over the Greeks in terms of preserving the light of the Torah, and that we see the deeper layers of life. And the fast of the 10th of Tevet represents the fact that we are forced to translate the Torah into Greek, and the darkening of the Jewish people's eyes, because now, as perhaps appropriately put by Neil Postman, in I think Amusing Ourselves to Death, or maybe Technopoly, that once the printing press came out and the Bible was translated not from, I guess, Latin into, again, Lahavdil, from Latin into English and to French and to all these other languages, we now turn God into an Englishman and into a Frenchman, and the kind of the cosmic meaning of the Torah was dimmed by translating it into a foreign language, because there are obviously many subtleties that were lost. We'll leave it there and have a positive week.